we are going to create a Voltapp form from which, when completed, we'll add a row to the Notions table. We will need three things: an account on editor.voltapp.tech, then you can create a new project to get your first app screen like mine. Also, an account on make.com, and an account on notion.so. When you have your three accounts created, feel free to put them in three tabs to better see their effect on each other. The first step is to go to Notion. You have to click on Add a Page in the left menu, then on Table, and finally on New Database. Here it is very important to give a title to the database to later find it in the Make tool. In this example, I will call it Demo Voltapp Notion. Then we are going to modify our table to receive the data from newsletter subscription forms, which include a name, a first name, and an email. I rename the first column Name to First Name, the second column Tags into Last Name. The type of last name column will change to text. Then we add a last column, which will be the email. Now our table is ready to receive the data from your Voltapp application. Back on Voltapp, we will create our form. A Voltapp is made with bricks of code called nodes. So let's go to the Nodes menu on the top, and let's add the input node that we drag into the list of nodes on the left. For this node, the blue box you see on the right is a variable, which is a dynamic attribute that will contain the first data of the form, the user first name. So let's rename it First Name. We modify its placeholder, which is what is displayed as the default message, so that the user knows what to fill in this field. Let's create two other inputs, and let's do the same for each variable and placeholder. For last name, and then for email. Finally, let's create a button for the user to validate the form. Let's place it at the end of the list of nodes. Change its text to Submit Form. Then, save our project. Let's talk about the variables organization in the app. By clicking on the first input, then going to the Variables menu, we see the variable first name linked to this node. In Voltapp, by default, variables are linked to their node in order to easily reuse a node in another app by keeping its dynamic attributes. Here, we will move the variables up to the parent node app by dragging them to the top of the list of nodes. Let's do that for the first input node, the second one, and the third one. Let's visually no-code the behavior of the button when it is clicked. To do this, let's click on it and then switch to its graph mode by clicking on the graph icon on the top. Let's add the very first block, which is always an event block. Let's choose here the click block. We will then send an HTTP request to make. An HTTP request is a bit like going into a lobby to reach an office for a request. You need the office identification. Here, the office identification is a link, a URL waiting for you to receive your request. Let's extend the arrow to the right of the click block to create the next HTTP request block. The URL will be provided by Make later. First, we need to define the method of the request. Let's choose POST, which allows to send data. Others exist like GET, which would have allowed us to receive other data. Then we have to define the data model of the request. Here it is a pack of information, which we call an object, containing 3 datas. Object already being selected, let's create these 3 data. First, first name, then last name, then email. We must now indicate to the block where this object composed of 3 datas will come from. In Voltapp, to visually define an attribute of the block, we must extend the point of this attribute. So let's extend the data point to choose the block structure, an object. By clicking on this block, we could simply fill in the data by hand. But let's make it smarter by connecting each corresponding variable to it using the link icon. Let's connect the data first name to the variable first name, last name to last name, and email to email. Let's save and go to Make. Make is an automation tool that will continuously run a server for you, otherwise known as a distant computer always running, waiting for the trigger instructions to send from one tool to automatically create action instructions on another tool. More than 2,000 applications are available to automate the sending of emails, notifications, or the updating of a table, which is what we will do in Notion. Let's go to the scenario icon on the left, which looks like a graph, and press the Create a Scenario button. A scenario in Notion is like a graph in Voltapp. Read from left to right. Let's choose the triggering instructions, the webhook. The webhook is a format to receive HTTP requests. Many tools offer webhooks, allowing you to connect Voltapp directly to them. Let's create a custom webhook, then create a new one by clicking on Add, leave the default title, then click Save. Make then tells you that the webhook is open to HTTP request that uses this URL in blue. We can then copy and paste it into the HTTP request block on Voltapp. Let's see if it works by testing the application. Let's click on the Preview button on top. Let's put some test information to try. Then click on Submit Form. Let's go back to Make and there it is. It did receive our data and understood it. So the webhook is now finished. Let's click on OK to close it. Let's click on Add another module to choose the Notion tool and select the action instructions. We can see many possibilities. We are interested in creating a line in a database, so let's choose Create a Database Item. We need to connect to our Notion now. Let's click on Add and choose Notion Public that we could have named. And then click on Save. A window opens so that your Notion can authorize Make to connect to it. Click on Select Pages and choose the new page which we have previously created. Then click on Allow Access. Since the Notion page can be made up of several databases, we must indicate the ID of the database concerned. Let's copy the name Demo Voltapp Notion from the database and paste it into Make and then search it by clicking on Search. Make then automatically finds its ID. The first 3 columns of the database also appear. Let's click in the first name box to see which data of the triggering webhook we can send it to. Let's drag the first name data into the first name box. Let's do the same for last name and email. The Make scenario is now complete. Let's test it by clicking on Run Once at the bottom left. Make is waiting for the HTTP request. Let's submit the form again. You can see that in Make, the webhook trigger and the Notion action have turned green. The scenario has worked. Indeed, at the bottom right, you can see the history of the instructions in the log. Finally, let's go to Notion and magic. A new line in the database has been created. Now that our test is successful, let's activate the scenario in Make for all future requests by clicking on the Run button. Let's go back to Voltapp for an optional aesthetic step. Make the application centered for all screen sizes. Let's click on the section node on the left, which groups and organizes the other nodes. Then in the attribute section menu on the right, let's choose in the layout part to change the width from fit, otherwise known as fitting the content, to percentage of the screen, which is 100% by default. Let's do the same for the length of the section. Now let's publish our application to make it available to everyone by clicking on the Publish link at the top. If you've already done it, like me, you can also indicate the changes in this version. A link is generated. Let's click on it, and we will have access, like everyone else, to the form application. Let's enter other information, such as a new user, first name, last name, email, and validate the form. Let's go back to Notion. And that's it. The Voltapp app is connected live to Notion. We have succeeded. We've created an app in no code connected to Notion. With Voltapp, you can create any interface to send and retrieve as much data to Notion as you want.